Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Galit Speaks podcast. I am excited for our guest today, Kate Kunkel. She turned her mother's tragic illness and death from dementia into her mission in life. When she learned that this and most dementias were preventable, Kate expanded her healing work as a sound therapist and vegan nutritionist and became both an Amen certified brain health professional and Apollo ReCode coach. Now, through personal coaching, group programs, and in her books, Kate helps people take action to remedy the mental and physical health issues that can threaten their ability to learn, remember, make good decisions, and enjoy life. She is also the international best-selling author of Don't Let the Memories Fade, a holistic guide to preventing dementia and creating a healthier, more vibrant future, and the Healthy Brain series, which includes the vegan brain and the musical brain. Kate's passion and empathy shines through in her commitment to better brain health for all, reminding us that it is never too early to look after your brain, but it can become too late. Ooh.
Indeed, it can.
Yeah. So I would love to hear more about your journey and how you know, what illness did your mother have and how did that translate into what you're doing?
Sure. So my mom was diagnosed with dementia. Gosh, it's 13 years ago now. And it was at the same time, actually, that I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And it was kind of like this double whammy for us. And I realized as I started doing research, because that's just the way I am, I have to figure out why things happen. I don't like to just say, okay, well, there we go. I have to understand why. So when I dug really deep, I saw that what I was going through with rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune disease is actually very much related to many forms of dementia because it's all about inflammation. So that got me on this path of firstly trying to make myself better so that I could be of use to my mom, but then also trying to see if I could make her life better, her mind stronger. Unfortunately, by the time she got, and this is why I say it can become too late, because by the time mom was diagnosed, she was already in what we would now call stage 3, which is really hard to reverse. And I also lived many, many miles away. So it was hard for me to institute the programs that I now know work to reverse it. But that's what got me on this whole journey. Like I couldn't understand how, because my mom was like a force of nature. And when I say force of nature, she was self-educated. She had her own store. She taught herself, reading, writing. She was amazing. And this is what happened to her. I couldn't understand it. So now I know why, but I don't want anybody else to ever have to suffer this, because the great thing is at least 75%, maybe more, of all dementias are preventable with lifestyle modifications.
Yeah, so this topic is actually really near to my heart because actually my grandmother, she is now in her late 90s, although she'll be very mad that I just said that. um, but she is starting to have the beginning stages of dementia, and she also has been like a force my entire life. She was ahead of her time. She never learned how to drive, and so she walked everywhere. She lives in Israel, and so she walked. You know, she went folk dancing up at every week up until a few years ago. She just constantly doing part of a million different things. Was always learning. Even now, she's like teaching herself German just because.
That's
um,
awesome.
so yeah, so even knowing that somehow there might be something that I could tell her or help her with that will slow this down
Right.
is really important for me.
Sure, sure. And I mean, it could be something as simple as a toxin that she's being exposed to. It could be something like the glyphosate that's in so much of the food all around the world, right? It's everywhere, it's everywhere. And it could be finally catching up to her. Like it's those sorts of things. Because as we get older, our body has had a chance to absorb more of the toxins in the world. And even though you may do all the right things, it's still really hard to overcome. There are like 80,000 chemicals now that weren't around when your grandma was a kid.
Yeah.
Right? So all of those things in our human bodies, we haven't evolved to adapt to that stuff. It's like a poison to us. So even if you're doing all the right things, it's really hard. And detoxification is one thing that I suggest to people if they've done so many other things right in their lives, then that's something I always ask them to look at is, or could there be mold? All of those things can cause the symptoms of dementia. The great thing is that they can be reversed. You get rid of the toxins and you get rid of the problem.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I will definitely, she lives in Israel, so I will definitely next time, or I'll send my sister there who also lives in Israel and just, can you check the apartment? Because I do notice that, I don't know if that's specific to her dementia or the type of dementia that she has. It does get worse at night. She seems very lucid during the day when she's active and out of the house and doing things.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like settles in at night. So,
Sundowners.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the first thing I would look for. If normally she's got a good diet and she's obviously out doing fun things and being engaged with people, yeah, it would be worth a look that way.
Yeah. All right. So tell me a little bit about another thing that you mentioned was your past in as a sound therapist. And so I
Yeah.
want to know a little bit more about that and how that plays into all of this.
Oh, sure. So sound therapy, I started playing the harp when I was 32. And it was as a result of a dream that led me to play the harp. And as I became very um, involved in the world of music again, because I was a pianist when I was a kid, I did all that stuff we all did when we were kids. But when I took up the harp as an adult, it was for personal healing. And the more I became involved in it and I learned how incredibly powerful this particular instrument was, I I started working with people, just, friends and acquaintances, and realized the healing power of that instrument. But then I was able to expand and understand about frequencies themselves. So one of the things I do now is what's called vibroacoustic therapy. And we actually use pure frequency programs. They're generated by a computer, but we have specific frequencies and they go through this amazing, like a bed. It's like a zero gravity bed, and there are transducers in the bed. So we send these frequencies into the bed, and as you're lying on it, then those frequencies actually go through your body and they create a state of intense relaxation. But depending on the frequency and depending on your condition, then it can help, you know. So, for example, Alzheimer's. There are actually studies, we know that using 40 hertz, a program of 40 hertz on people with Alzheimer's, we can actually slow down the progression of the disease. And in some cases, depending on all the other lifestyle changes they make, we can actually help reverse it. And that's amazing. There are two studies that have shown that. Of course, there isn't money for research like there is for drugs, so it's a little harder to get the money together to do big studies. But the ones that have been done are very promising, and I have seen amazing things with frequencies for people with Parkinson's disease. We can actually slow down or stop the tremors, and we can help them with gait and anxiety. So that's one side of sound therapy that I just love. The other part, of course, is the musical part of
Yeah.
sound, and that is when we tap into what we all are. We're all music, right? We were the first thing we knew in our mother's womb is the heartbeat. And that's why rhythm is so important to human beings. And so sound therapy from drums, from frequencies, from harp. When you hold the harp against your body and you strum it, it sets up a vibration in your body. It's amazing. It is so healing. And actually, there was a fellow, a music professor, Dr. Ron Price, who suffered a form of Parkinson's, and he was a trumpet player. He could not play his trumpet anymore because of the state of his disease. And somebody said to him, "Why don't you try the harp? It's it's been shown to help." And sure enough, as he played the harp, as he learned the harp and he played it and he held it against his body, the frequencies and the music itself worked together to reverse his symptoms, so much so that he was able to play his trumpet again. That's a big deal. Unfortunately, when you stop it, the symptoms can come back. So you have to keep doing it. But it's the same with most good therapies, right? If we're set up to resonate, that's, we need to do that. We need to do, just like we need to do exercise all the time. You can't do exercise for 6 months and then stop. You have to exercise, right? You have to keep your body going, your mind going. So that's 2 parts of sound therapy. The third part is learning to play a musical instrument. Because when we learn to play a musical instrument, our brains get stronger. The corpus callosum, that amazing white matter that connects the 2 hemispheres of our brain, becomes stronger and more robust, and it sends messages back and forth faster and much more accurately. So musicians tend to they must have much more cognitive reserve. So if something happens to a musician, to their brain, they are not as likely to suffer serious dementia like somebody else might, because their brains are already used to finding pathways to get the information from point A to point B. Whereas if you don't have that cognitive reserve, like you have, instead of 10 ways to get information as a musician, you only have 2 ways. And if one of them's damaged, then it can't get there, or it might have a really hard time getting there. So that's cognitive reserve. And that's why learning to play a musical instrument is so powerful. The younger you learn it, the better. But just because you didn't learn it as a kid doesn't mean it doesn't work. You can still get the benefits, even if you're 70 when you start.
Wow. And let's say for someone like me who I learned an instrument in elementary school and have not played it since, how are the benefits for someone like me?
There's still a little bit of lingering depending on how long you played it, and did you learn to read music? Because those things have a cumulative effect.
Okay.
But yeah, but it is better if you can pick it up again. Pick up any instrument. Pick up a gong. Pick up one of those little thumb drums. Anything, because it's making that rhythm, which is so important. We think we're in rhythm, and it also has you focusing on something mindfully. Mindfulness is very important too, right? So when you're playing an instrument and you're really getting into it, besides the rhythm and the actual physical part of doing it, you're becoming more mindful. And that's a really powerful brain booster too.
Yeah, you just reminded me. So my husband is a musician, and he bought me a little lyre, which is, yeah, so it's like a mini harp, I guess.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed that. And so he started to teach me that, and then it just kind of fell off. But that would be something that,
perfect.
Yeah, that I could pick up and try to learn again.
Yeah. And this great thing about lyres, you can't really go wrong because they're tuned to a key, right? It's not like you can really play a wrong note. You just want to play around with it, and you can. That's the great thing about even harps. Like I can play the pedal harp, but I play a folk harp. And once you set it to a key, it's pretty hard to make it sound bad. Just to play from your heart, right? So that's the great thing about it. And you know what? The cool thing, Galit, it doesn't matter if you play it well. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if you ever play it for anyone else. This is all about your heart and your brain and your mindful attention to something beautiful. That's all that really matters.
Yeah, I love that. And I also felt it was really powerful when you said that we're so in tune to rhythm because the first thing that we hear is our mother's heartbeat. And I think that's like that's a beautiful way to put it, where we all know that as humans we have a connection with sound and we have a connection with music and with rhythm. Even, I have spoken with deaf people who can dance with rhythm,
Hmm.
and it's because they feel it.
Hmm.
And so
Absolutely.
knowing where that comes from, I think, is so powerful, and why that's so important to us.
Oh yeah. And that's another thing about vibroacoustic therapy that I do. You don't have to be able to hear it because you feel it. You feel it in your body. It's so incredible. You know, you get into that parasympathetic nervous state, which is the opposite of what most people are in most of the time. Sympathetic nervous state is that fight or flight state. And when we are in a state of relaxation with sound, and of course my specialty is vibroacoustic sound, but when we get into that, we get out of that fight or flight mode and into the rest, relax, and rejuvenate mode. And that is so powerful for everything about us, right? From everything from mental health to brain health to even how our stomach works, our gut health. It's all important.
Yeah. So what if someone is looking to start on this path to using sound as a healing mechanism? What are some steps that they can take?
First thing is mindfully listening. You know, um, people listen to music all the time, but they don't really pay attention to it. So, have you ever done the exercise where you mindfully eat something like a strawberry and you smell it, you touch it so you can feel the little rough nubbies from the seeds. You may pull off the stem so you can hear that little pop, you bite into it, you smell it. All of that is called mindful eating. You can do the same thing with music, listening to music. So you let it, how does it feel against your body? Maybe wherever you are, how does it make your body feel? What's in your ears? What's in your thoughts? You know, does it make you want to move? Are you responding to it? Mindfully listening to music is the first thing I always have my clients do, because when you really pay attention, also if you're listening to say an orchestral piece, choose an instrument that suits your fancy. Could be this for me. I always like listening to the cello. I love the cello. Tried to play it, wasn't good at it, but and that's the professional musician in me coming out, which I should have let go of. But anyway, I like to follow what the cellos do in an orchestral piece. And anybody can do that. You follow that, their how they weave in and out of the rest of the music. By doing that, you're almost getting the same benefits as playing the cello, because you're paying attention to the beats, you're paying attention to where it comes and goes, its rhythm, its melody or counter melody, how it fits in with all the other instruments. It's a very powerful way to start using music as a therapy or as a way to boost your brain and your body. The other thing is something so incredibly simple. Anybody can do it anywhere, anytime, and that is humming.
Hmm.
Humming. Mindfully humming is one of the most powerful things we can do for our brain and our body, because when we hum, we stimulate the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is that superhighway between our brain and all of our other organs, starting with the gut. So there's this superhighway of information that goes up and down, and it's right behind our vocal cords. So when we hum, we stimulate the vagus nerve and help it do its work, increasing blood flow, increasing hormonal production. That's so simple. And if we pay attention to it, then we're also getting the benefits of mindfulness. But even just humming, as you're humming along to a song that you're listening to, humming when you're in the car, humming when you're doing your housework, any of those things, it is a very powerful, very easy, and anybody can do it. If you've got vocal cords, you can hum.
Okay. That's really great. And I think that's very easy and simple to do. I know that I personally tend to not necessarily hum, but like make noise along with music. So it's good to know that that is actually helping me. And I feel like, yeah, as not really being a musician myself, I can still get the benefits.
Absolutely. You're making your own kind of music.
Yes.
There was a
So
great song when I was a kid. Make your own kind of music, sing your own kind of song. And I'm definitely not a singer, but I love to sing. I'll sing in the shower, I'll sing in the garden, I don't care. I'll sing to my cats. I dance with my cats. Like music and dancing. That's the other thing, dancing. You were mentioning about your grandmother dancing? Was it?
yeah. So my
Yeah,
grandmother,
folk dancing.
yep.
So folk dancing, because you have to remember and work with other people, footsteps and probably hand movements, depending on what kind of dancing it is, right? What kind of folk it is. There is a lot going on in the brain. So that is very powerful. Dancing, if you're doing like salsa or ballroom dancing or anything like that where it requires some kind of coordination and memory of steps, it's very powerful. But even just regular dancing is good exercise, and you get the benefit of being with other people and having joy. Joy is the other thing that's so important for our brains and our bodies, to have joy and express it. Don't you love watching little kids when they dance? That's one of my favorite things, to watch little kids dance, because it's absolute unmitigated joy. And they're just having a good time. And that's, we all need to remember that. Having the joy of just moving and dancing to our own kind of music.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's important to get in touch with your inner child, and I love that you brought that up because uh, you know that is such an important part of us that sometimes needs to be soothed, sometimes needs to be let out. Especially as an adult, giving your inner child a safe space seems like the way to go.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, and I used to dance disco. My goodness, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I danced a lot of disco. And and at the time, I had a very serious back injury. Oddly enough, it was like a whiplash, and it lasted like 9 years. I had trouble for a long time. But during all of that time, I danced. And I really believe that that's why I didn't go crazy from the pain, because I danced. Okay, so the next day I might suffer a little bit more, but for that time, the endorphins were there, the joy was there, and I just forgot about being in pain. And I
Yeah,
really think that anybody who can use dance or any kind of music to overcome pain is one very powerful thing. Pain and, yeah, depression is also going to help with depression, right? When you're moving like that.
yeah. So what other things can we do to improve brain health? So we've talked about toxins, we've talked about music, we've talked about mindfulness and joy. What are some other things that people can do to make sure that they don't fall into dementia?
Yeah, food. Their food is really important. We need to be, I'm a vegan and I espouse a vegan lifestyle. I believe that body, mind, and spirit is healthier when you don't consume products from traumatized animals. I truly believe that. I believe that it affects you. Even if you aren't vegan, though, you need to have a very close eye on where your food comes from. I know it's very expensive, especially in Canada and the United States, to buy organic food. perhaps by design, but it's very expensive. I happen to live in Ecuador, where organic food is maybe only like 10% more than traditionally grown. So I'm very lucky, and I have my own garden, so that helps a lot. I know where my food comes from, and if you can work with local organic gardeners, that's really important. As much fresh fruits and vegetables as you can, as little processing as you can, because our bodies, again, I'm going back to the idea of us as human beings, we haven't evolved to a state where our bodies know what to do with the crap that's in most of the food. Honestly, when it's processed, there's just too much in there that our bodies don't know what to do with. So I think that's an important thing to cook. Cooking itself is amazingly good for you, right? Because you send your love, your energy into the food that you make. My husband is really sick right now. I just got him home from hospital yesterday. He was in intensive care and on a respirator for a long time. He just came home yesterday. And the first thing I'm doing is making sure he's got good quality food, because I know that's going to be his path to healing. So, clean food, fresh food, lovingly prepared. And when you cook, you have a vested interest in enjoying that too. So we're going to go back to the mindful eating. Don't just slap it together and then shovel it down. Enjoy it. Every bite is important. And if you think about what that food is doing for your body and your brain, and well, think of firstly your gut, because that's where it's going to land. What are we feeding our gut? Are we feeding those little the microbiome? Are we feeding it good stuff, or stuff that's going to give us not so good, not such a healthy microbiome? So all of those things are important to consider. Your food is, food, really important. And you can see a big difference in when people go into, say, like a nursing home. When my mother was so bad that they couldn't look after her at home anymore, and I was thousands of miles away, she ended up going into this nursing home. And I knew she was in pretty bad shape when she went in, but by the time I got up to Canada and saw her, oh my gosh, Galit, it was shocking how much she had deteriorated from when I would call her on Sunday nights at home.
Yeah.
Like, to go and see her, it was like a whole different person. And I'm convinced, I looked at the food they were giving them and it was slop. I'm telling you, it was slop. So of course their minds are going to deteriorate even faster. So that's a really important thing. Fresh, whole foods, minimally processed is the other thing. And of course, exercise. We talked about that a little bit with dancing, but exercise is so important. Yeah. At least, I'm a Dr. Dale Bredesen. He's the gentleman who invented or who wrote the book, The End of Alzheimer's. And he has actually had 2 studies, and one of his proteges has had another study that's been accepted and published, showing that they have actually reversed Alzheimer's. Not just slowed it down, reversed it from pretty serious to where they could go home again. They could go home and have a functioning life. So one of the big things he talks about is exercising, and it should be a mixture of cardio and something that builds muscles, because muscles are also really important to have that stability, so that we're not worried about falling and that sort of thing. But it also impacts the gray matter. So we want to have a combination and use those two, that combination at least 120 minutes a week.
Okay.
Which doesn't seem like a lot, right? It's only like 4 days of 30 minutes. Big deal. Me, I like to do about 200 minutes because I'm 65. I don't want to be going down that road, and I already have fought off autoimmune disease. So I'm trying to do a lot more. And I think that's another important thing. What is your background? Have you had a serious disease? Have you fought cancer? Have you ever been given chemicals to fight cancer? Or had radiation? All of those things will impact how your body responds to any other attacks. So you want to take all that into account when you're looking at how to keep your brain healthy or make it healthier.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you talk about being vegan. I'm also vegan, although probably not as healthy vegan as you. I'm vegan for the animals, and so there is some, processed food
Says,
that I do consume. Um, but I know that when I've spoken with my doctor, and I feel like really my primary doctor is actually my naturopath. And even when so I had a heart condition, COVID gave me a heart condition. I still have it. But that was one of the first things that the cardiologist talked about, and the first thing that my naturopath talked about. It was like, what is your diet? And when I told them vegan, it was like, okay, good, because that was the first thing that I was going to tell you. So,
wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. Very happy to hear that. Yeah.
so it definitely, and I love that you also mentioned that it's, conscious and thinking about the animals and the traumatic experience that they have right before they pass, and having those feelings and that energy in our
Energy.
food that we're going to eat, that we're going to consume to give us energy, is something very hard to think about.
And not even the ones that are killed, even not when they're being killed. Think of the, well, you probably don't eat pork, but Galit, we've seen pictures of these poor sows in these horrible crates where they're stuffed, without any access to their babies, where the calves are snatched away from their mothers the moment they're born, so that we can drink their milk. Like, how insane is that? So that energy, though, that oh, it's not just in the food that is from the killed animal, but also from the products of the animals, the chickens, with the eggs from the chickens and those sorts of things. It is there everywhere. And I truly believe it has a huge impact. I honestly believe all of the changes since I was a little girl. I grew up on a farm. It was a very different farm than farms are today.
Yeah.
Um, Opa's rabbits were treated with love. He would like pet them and everything until the moment he killed them. But that's how they lived. And I think that the energy of just the whole planet has been changed by agriculture, modern agriculture, animal agriculture. And I think it affects so many people because the anger, people just aren't very nice a lot of the times anymore. You see, like if you fly, you never know what you're going to get anymore. People are so angry and they do crazy things. I hate flying now because you just never know what you're going to run into, because people get like it's like there's a temper tantrum on the planet.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely feel it. I do fly a lot. And one of the it's so funny because I've been flying since I was very young. Like I was not even one, I believe, the first time I went on a plane. So like I remember the days as a kid that it was such a fun experience, and getting my little wings on every
Nice.
flight, and getting to go into the cockpit and talk to the pilot as a child. And also, like, I know that people are going to hate me for this, but like the clapping when we landed, like that was such a fun experience for me as a kid.
Yeah.
And I know that people hate that now. They're like, oh my God, you like the clapping? The clapping is horrible. But I mean, it was a different kind of world and a different kind of experience. And yes, things have become more commercial, right?
Mm.
Everything is a little bit more capitalistic and commercial, and the joy gets sucked out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good term. The joy gets sucked out of it. So many things. Yeah. When you said about the clapping, I live in South America, as I mentioned, and still today, when we land here, there's clapping and praying when we take off. It's really interesting. It's very different, but it's like, yeah, kind of going back to the way things were when I was a kid in North America. Things are a little bit closer to that here now, although it's sinking into commercialism too, unfortunately. One of the reasons I moved here was because I wanted to get away from that. I really, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life surrounded by that stuff. Stuff.
Yeah.
It's all about stuff,
Yeah.
and I wanted to get away from the stuff. And I've certainly managed it here because this is where I live out in the country in Ecuador. Stuff is not important. It's family that's important. It's a really different lifestyle, and I'm so grateful for it.
How did you choose Ecuador?
Uh, I used to do a television program many years ago. I did it for 9 years. And when the show was ending, I was offered a job here in Ecuador to host an expat TV program. I turned it down because I wanted to go home and be near my mom. But I had that sort of planted the seed about Ecuador and that it was a possibility for when I wanted to get away from the rat race. And so when I met my husband, he's a little older than me, so he said, I don't want to I don't want to retire in Canada. It's too cold. And yeah, I didn't want to be in Canada anymore either because it's too cold. So I said, well, I hear Ecuador is pretty good. Let's go check it out. So we landed in Quito, which is the capital of Ecuador, and we rented a car and we just drove around the country for a few weeks and decided that, yeah, this is it. This is it. The people were so nice, and I hardly spoke any Spanish, and we got lost a few times. And the kindness of strangers to these gringos who couldn't speak their language was so refreshing to me. They were so helpful. And so we got to the end of our trip, and we stayed at a B&B here in Punta Carnero. And we said to the hosts, who happened to be American, said, we're going to have to come back and find a place here. We're just going to have to find a place here. And they said, well, there's one for sale right around the corner. And so here we are.
That's amazing. And yes, that is definitely the feeling that I get when I'm in South America as well. I did some traveling. So I did backpacking. I backpacked when I was 19 through South America for 6 months.
Good for
And
you.
yeah, and that was one of the biggest takeaways for me. And that's like one of the things that has stuck with me throughout my life. This idea that not like I had so little for 6 months, right? I had just a backpack for 6 months and I had an amazing time. And then I would go and I stayed with local people in several different countries. And I met these people and I coming from at the time I was living in New York, coming from New York and having so much stuff and having the emphasis on being accumulating more stuff and having like the latest stuff. And then meeting these families and these kids that were just so joyous with so little. And the housing was not the best and the toys were not the best. And I met actually in this was I met in this is the craziest story, but I lived for a little bit on an Amish farm in the Amazon jungle with an Amish family, and like the amount of joy that they had there and the amount that they could do with so little. Like I tore some ligaments in my ankle, and this like 17-year-old Amish kid made me crutches out of a solid piece of wood, like just one solid piece of wood, like just by memory, looking at his little brother had gotten crutches one time, and like he created these beautiful like masterpiece crutches for me to walk around on, and just seeing what could be accomplished and how you could feel so grateful with so little was an experience that changed me completely.
Awesome. I wish everybody could have that experience, Galit. I really do. It's It would be a different world, I think, if more people had that kind of experience, because it does change you. My heart has been changed forever being here.
Yeah.
Forever. Yeah.
So what do you recommend to people looking to, leave the rat race and
Yeah.
find another place?
I think you have to be your mindset has to be first, because you can't come to a place like this. I mean, a lot of people do, and this is kind of sad because I see it all the time. We'll have people come here from the US or Canada, and they move here because it's less expensive to retire. And a lot of people have a very limited income when they're retiring for whatever reason, and they come here because it's cheap. But they want all the good things that they had in the US or Canada when they had a job and they had people waiting on them hand and foot and all that stuff. So I think your mindset has to be the first thing, that this is not home. This is not what it was like back there. And I think that's really important before you make a decision to come to a place like this, because and there are two two volumes of music in Ecuador: off and full. Nothing in between. There's nothing
Okay.
in between. And I live in the country for a reason, because I don't like that. I have to have my silence. I'm very much into having silence. But there are people who move on to the Malecon in Salinas, which is the closest city to us, and it's a tourist. It's called Ecuador's Miami. So it has bars and restaurants, and it's going 24/7, especially during a carnival, and people complain about it. Well, you can't change the culture. You have to go to a place and remember that you're a guest. I'm a guest here.
Yeah.
This is I've been fortunate enough to be accepted to live here permanently, as I've chosen, but I'm a guest here. And I take that seriously, that I'm not going to change. There are some things I help change, like I help people eat when they don't have food, and I help, sterilize animals and that sort of thing. But I'm not going to change the culture. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because of the culture. And I think that's the first thing. If people think they want to go somewhere else, then don't think that you're going to change it and make it wherever it is you came from. You're not going to make where you're going to like that. I think that's the first thing. And also be realistic about how much money you really need to live. People say, oh, I can live really cheap in Ecuador. And yes, my groceries are only $60 a week. Yeah, that's great, which would be 360 in Canada, but it's $60 a week here. And that's not counting the cat and dog food that I feed everybody, but my groceries. So, um, but people, they think that it's cheap like that, so they can get everything cheap, but that's not how it works. You can't, like electricity is expensive here. There are still going to be things that are expensive, and you have to think about really a realistic budget, and don't get suckered into think that you're going to get here and be, living for nothing, because you still have to consider all of the expenses that you have to when you're home, wherever that is. Yeah.
So do you continue to work? So obviously you're doing podcasts, right?
Hmm.
Have you
Hmm.
continued to work while in Ecuador, and what do you
Oh,
do?
100%. I'm a brain health coach. That's all I do, and a sound therapist. And I incorporate my sound therapy with the brain health coaching, because it's such an important part of a healthy brain. So I do the sound therapy. A lot of what I do here, also, I do a lot of animal rescue work and helping with it's such a problem. I'm sure you noticed that when you were going through South America, the number of homeless animals and sick animals. So that's kind of my big thing. And I also work with a couple of different organizations here. We try to empower women to have better choices, to make better choices, and to have more control over their lives. Again, we're not going to change the culture, but we want the women to feel strong enough to change what they want to change. And I think that's an important thing, because it is a macho culture. It is. And, that's just the way it is. But that means that a lot of women and children end up in dire straits that they don't need to be, because they don't understand that they have choices. So the women I work with, that's kind of what we're helping them do.
Yeah. And so let's say that somebody wants to work with you. Is that possible, or do they have to be in Ecuador?
Oh no, most of my work is online. Yeah, I do almost all of my coaching is online, and the sound therapy. I actually teach other therapists. I teach other coaches and massage therapists and holistic practitioners to do vibroacoustic therapy, because then they can do it wherever they are. And I can send my brain health clients to them if they're close by. That's kind of how I'm working this, because I want to get more people to have the benefits of the sound therapy that I believe in so much. I've been doing it 23 years. I've been doing vibroacoustic therapy 23 years, and I've gone through a lot of changes. And so that's kind of what I do. But as far as people working with me for brain health, they just can go to my website, brainhealthmatters.today, and they have a chance to get some free information, like how to use music to help your brain. The other steps that you can take. I have vegan recipes. I love giving out my vegan recipes. And yeah, because I'm also a vegan nutritionist. So that's a lot of fun. I love creating recipes. I love cooking. So that's a big joy for me.
Yeah, I also actually, a lot of people have asked, is it so much harder to cook vegan? And it's so not. I have had so much fun taking like childhood dishes and childhood things that I loved, like I'm Syrian Israeli, so like the stuff that was like my grandmother used to make, or somebody like a family friend that I loved this dish, and veganizing it, and
Yeah.
it's been an awesome journey doing that.
Isn't it great? I mean, and to me, I grew up in a German family, so there's lots of schnitzels and that sort of thing. But you can do amazing. I can make like what tastes like my Oma's potato salad, hot potato salad, from vegan ingredients, and it uses bacon, in the traditional recipe. So I can do that, and cabbage rolls and things like that that I grew up with. I can do all of that vegan. And the great thing is, I think I think it makes you more um yeah, trying different spices, trying different flavors, right? Because
Mhm.
you can try Asian, you can try Lebanese, you can try so many different kinds of food with the spices. I just love playing with spices and herbs, and I never did that before. When I became vegan, I just went, hey, I've just had so much fun with the spices.
Yeah, I'm big on spices. I feel like been big being Middle Eastern, you're big on spices
Oh
all the
yeah.
time, from
Yeah.
childhood. But yeah, what you said actually reminded me of like a funny little joke that, when people say, "Oh, you're vegan, why do you try to make things taste like meat?" And then the response to that is, "Don't you add like spices to your food? Aren't you trying to make it taste like a plant?"
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You're not gonna eat meat the way it tastes, like, on its own. Nobody
Yeah.
does,
Right?
you
We're
know?
adding
It's
something to it. We're adding a
yeah,
mineral. We're adding salt, pepper.
anything. Yeah, yeah, we're not they're not lions. They're not eating it like it came off the roof.
Exactly. So, um, thank you so much. And so, how do we get your books? I know I mentioned
Ah,
them really briefly in the intro. Can you talk a little bit
sure.
about your books and where we can get them?
Sure, Amazon, everywhere around the world, anywhere there's Amazon, you can get them. The Musical Brain is probably my favorite. I really love the Musical Brain because I have exercises for people to use to tap into the power of music and sound. So it's very much a hands-on kind of thing where you learn to really tap into the power of music. And then of course the Vegan Brain. It's all about why we can be so much brainier if we're vegan. So I like that one too. Don't Let the Memories Fade is also available in print. The others are just ebooks, right? Still at this time, but the Don't Let the Memories Fade is also in print, and that was written to honor my mom, and it's the complete program that I use to help people get healthier and to boost their brains and prevent dementia. So that is the Bible for me of how to use all of my knowledge that I've gained over these many years of research and practice with my clients to get going. You can do this. It's kind of, for a lot of people, the information is so overwhelming. Like you just said, where do we start? Where do we start? We start with very simple things like getting rid of the sugar. That's number one. And being more mindful. Those two things go a long way to helping you take control of your life, your lifestyle, how you treat your body, your brain. So Don't Let the Memories Fade was written in honor of my mom, and that's kind of the Bible on how to do it. But Musical Brain is still kind of my favorite because music is my first love.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom. I hope that anybody that is listening reaches out to Kate and takes her up on her coaching, on sound therapy. If you know like a massage therapist in your life that needs to add this to their repertoire, please send them Kate's way. And if you're listening to this now, or if you're listening to it on the replay, or right now on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please make sure to binge the rest of the episodes, like, share, subscribe, do all of the things so that this message can get out into the world.
Thank you so much, Galit. It was so much fun chatting with you.
Same. I really, really appreciate you coming in here and talking, and some of the things that you said were just so powerful and made me stop for a minute and have to like internalize it. So
I'm happy for that.
thank you. So everyone, I will see you next week for another episode of the Galit Speaks podcast. Until then, have an amazing week.